Let's talk objective standards in music and art.
Among the rain and lights I saw the figure 5 in gold on a red fire truck, moving tense on.
So what are objective standards? Do they matter? Should they even matter? Objective standards are rules, in essence, and also the way a particular piece of music or art compares to others in its tradition. How does its craft compare? Is that a way to rank works in terms of how good they are in the musical or artistic canon? In my opinion, objective standards only give a partial picture of a work of art. In any given time period, there are a certain set of rules that apply to music and art. In the case of the Romantic era and the Classical era, there was triadic harmony. And before that, the Baroque had its rules, and the Renaissance had its rules. And to a certain degree, there's a link also of the aesthetics of the time, that which is considered acceptable and beautiful. I've seen it said that the Impressionist composers and artists were a rejection or move away from objective standards. And any time that a group of artists reject objective standards, invariably the work has great artistic merit. I think few would argue that the works of Debussy or Ravel don't have artistic merit. They're beautiful, inspired, innovative. I've seen it argued that the further a culture, society moves away from objective standards, that the less artistic merit the music or art has. I think that's an interesting argument, only partially true. Rules are useful as to provide framework and adventure, because breaking the rules is very exciting. Nothing provides me more excitement than breaking the rules. If I'm writing a sonata, I get excitement when I decide I'm going to compose 5 movements instead of a classical 3 or 4. Or if I'm composing a fugue, I choose to compose a fugal subject that spreads over 2.5 octave range or uses an augmented fourth. Such things would be forbidden, of course, in the Baroque era. But what if there are no rules? What if the meaning of work or artistic object is simply what we think or feel it is, or what the artist says it is? That there is no hierarchy of work, that everything is equal, it's all based on what we feel it means. I think that's problematic in many ways. We need something to aspire to. We need excellence to admire. We have to be able to identify excellence. And under that postmodern kind of thinking, where everything is equal, there's nothing to aspire to, nothing to celebrate, nothing to strive towards. Everything is just the same. And clearly that can't be the case. It can't be that all art is equal in terms of inspiration and craft. Certainly, I look at my own works. Not every piece I compose is of equal craft or inspiration. There's variety. Now, it's an interesting phenomenon that sometimes the work I think is the best that I wrote, other people say actually they think a different one is. So that's a bit of a separate argument. But to say that an artistic object, and I'm going to refer to that as being a piece of music as an artistic object, is only ranked based on its craft, it would only be a partial picture. There's another element as well, and that is the experiential. What kind of experience does that create? So for instance, if I compose a piece of music and it's only listened to by 100 people, it's the best work I ever composed, and then there's a pop song which is really simple, but yet millions of people enjoy it. Does that mean because that pop song is of a lower objective standard or craft than my work that it is of no value? Clearly that is not the case. It is of great value because it is an experience to millions of people. So I tend to assess a piece of music based on a blend. So half of it based on the experiential and half of it based on the craft of the object. I think perhaps in the classical tradition it is more relevant when we compare a particular work, say a sonata. How does it compare to those before it? When we compose a sonata or a classical form, do we do honor to that tradition? Do we add to it? Do we make it better? Are we mindful about what came before us? Some would say not. Sometimes rules provide us with focus and direction. But there is a time where the rules get in the way. And there's times where the rules cease to be useful. For instance, when the Renaissance, the musical language of modes and vocal music at the time had run its course, innovation under that language and form had hit its limits. Eventually it would be supplanted by early monody and the Florentine camerata, earliest forms of opera. There's no way to know at any given time in history what that catalyst will be that will cause a fundamental shift, that shift that shifted the epic of music and art from the Baroque, from the Renaissance to the Baroque, or from the classical to the Romantic. At any given time, there may be music and art being created from either one. Even though a new era has come along, say the Impressionist movement, there's still going to be people composing in the Romantic time. We may have already had some great innovation as to what will be the great future aesthetic and epic of the future. We won't know it until hindsight. We won't know who it is. In fact, the person who ushered in that new era of artistic innovation and may not know it's them. They may never know. It's one of the curious things about history. But I believe objective standards do matter. We need checks and balances as artists to say, you know what, you're kind of writing stuff that really isn't doing honor to the sonatas that came before you. Otherwise, what are the checks and balances? What happens if we want to decide we want to live in a world where there shouldn't be music criticism, there shouldn't be comparison, where everyone gets the trophy, everyone wins the award as a composer? I think that would be pretty confusing and bland. So yes, objective standards have a place. We can question those standards, we can question those rules, we can question the ones making the rules, what their intentions are. We can question the entire language and aesthetics of where we're working in, and then the majority of people are working in. But to simply say that structure, form, tradition doesn't matter at all, it's simply what we feel is the only thing that matters. I think this is the greatest piece of music ever written because that's what I feel. I believe is an insufficient answer. And that goes back to, we need a balance of the experiential and objective standards. If it's all by experience and feeling, it's a very confusing fog to navigate the artistic and musical landscape. And if it's only a world of objective standards that we choose to live in and rules, then that's very stifling too, and can prevent innovation. The two have a place. The two have a place to help us feel and enjoy art on a personal level, and also the same time to recognize and celebrate that which is extraordinary. I think that's why objective standards still matter, at least to me. They don't have to you, but they do serve as a guide to me, because I am still inspired by those great composers before me who wrote music that I aspire to maybe someday those heights to reach, of craft, of form, of transition, technique. Maybe at one level we are afraid of objectivism, because then we would have to acknowledge that there are other people who are better than we are. And that can be quite painful and humbling. There always has to be someone better. And that is not a diminishment of ourselves. It's not a contest. We are all at different points on the musical journey. Some people, on their development as an artist or composer, are at the beginning of their journey over here. And then some people are moving faster than others. Some people are further along the journey than others. That's not a bad thing. Not something to be afraid of. Is it so terrible? The old Mozart and Salieri myth. Objective standards, objectivism, are they really to be afraid of? Rather than being scared of that one's fellow composers may be at a more advanced level than we are, to celebrate that and to strive to achieve greater in ourselves. And maybe the fear of recognizing excellence comes from envy, jealousy, roots that are quite natural. We see someone else winning the prizes, but we're not. Getting the recordings, we're not. Or getting put in that musical dictionary, or having the bust in the corridor made for them. So enjoy music as it is. So to sum up my thinking, I wonder if the very concept or words, objective standards, in art and music have become a bad word, something evil in the postmodern world. But without them, us artists don't really have any checks and balances. We need to be forced to up our game when we're not putting our best effort forward. Objective standards are very good at that. We wouldn't argue about applying such standards to musicians, especially classical musicians, if they're playing badly or haven't practiced. And we certainly do that for orchestral auditions. And we're quick to point out when one musician plays brilliantly and another one doesn't play so brilliantly. That's easy. But what about art? What about music? Composition? Why the difference? What are we afraid of? I think as composers, we need to up our game a little bit. It's healthy.